You are listening to the Tenets on the Kyle Dempster Studios network. To support us, visit patreon.com/Kyle Dempster Studios. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of The Tenets. My name is Kyle, and I'm joined here by my co-host, StarkeRealm. How are you, Stark?
Pretty good.
Good. It's we're back to a Sunday afternoon recording time. Last week we did ours live on Twitch, which was pretty interesting. I actually had people request that we do it again, but go figure that, like, we just nailed that intro just fine. But last week doing it live, I totally butchered it for the first time.
Twice, I think, yeah.
I don't even remember what happened, but the point is, of course, when you're doing it live, you butcher it. It's been an interesting week in ESO. It was very fun. Yesterday we did, we participated in the Extra Life charity, raised a couple $100 for kids, and got to give away Torchbug, a Crown Pack, and a Somerset base copy. So actually someone in the community is getting to play Elder Scrolls Online for the first time, which was a great thing. That's very, very exciting. So now we got someone new that'll come in, and I can just hand them the podcast and say, here you go. Here's 10 episodes of magic. Learn. But this week we're going to talk about scaling for you guys. We talked about vampires and werewolves last week, which was very Halloween appropriate. As we head into November here, we thought we'd give you guys a little bit of a dense episode, and this is going to be one that I am a little out of the loop on. Stark is going to be doing some serious education, and the real question of today will be, do I survive? And if I survive, will I have learned things? Where are you placing your bet, Stark?
I'm pretty sure you'll survive if we get good healers. Wait,
Wait, I'm a healer. Oh. I do let myself die. It's fine. Okay. Yeah. So in terms of scaling, we are talking about. Well, are we starting this off discussing the idea that when you start off at level 1, you have training wheels? Is that where you're coming at, this idea of scaling?
Yeah, that's part of it. Because, again, I actually ran the numbers earlier. It's a 90% buff by the time you get out of the tutorial.
Okay, 90% buff, you said.
Yeah, and that diminishes over time. I'm not completely clear whether it disappears entirely at level 50, like the instant you hit 50, or if it disappears when you hit 160. It's somewhere in between those 2 points, though.
Gotcha. So Stark is saying never level past level 3, because that is when you're at your strongest.
Yeah, that is when you are a god.
Okay, so you hear that, everybody. Level 3 for life.
Yeah, actually, the funny thing is I did crunch the numbers on that. When you're looking at legitimate endgame builds, you do have larger overall stat pools. But at that point, you're doing it from item sets and from points allocated, other sources. So it's significant. It is higher later in the game, like when you're actually at 160 and building off of that. But when you're looking at level 3s, for the fact that your character is half naked, yeah, you have really impressive stats.
Wow. Okay, so with these impressive stats, we know they go down over time, they diminish, and that means that you're more reliant on your gear set. Is that correct?
As you progress, yeah. Okay. Also, your familiarity with the game. This is something that used to be a lot more apparent back when level scaling wasn't everywhere. Mm-hmm. You could end up doing some stuff that was kind of ludicrous if you knew the mechanic. We talked about the werewolves yesterday, and I think you've done the werewolf intro quest.
Yes.
So it used to be you could do that at low levels, but the content in there was locked at level 43 or 38, somewhere in there. And you'd go in there with like a level 20 or 15, and the enemies would be egregiously powerful for you stat-wise.
Oh.
So something I've made as a comparison in the past, like I compared ESO to Dark Souls, where it's this kind of skill-based play. It holds true there. It held true there too, and you could really see it because they would hit hard. They would nearly one-shot you, or in some cases, they would straight up one-shot you if you were off level. But it was possible to clear that content. Just very difficult. So a lot of the part where you get later on in the game and these buffs are gone and you're relying on your gear is also relying on your familiarity with the gameplay, your familiarity with how the systems work. And this goes way back to something we said, I think it was in the first episode, which is please do not grind, because you won't learn to play the game. This is not an MMO where it's tab targeted and you just roll through your rotation and don't worry about anything else. It is entirely active and entirely direct control over your player, direct control over where you're at, and placement, dealing with the enemy, and understanding how to fight, how to deal with what they're throwing at you. Because even at the beginning when you have the inflated stats, you have the tools to deal with some of it and sort of soak it off if you screw up. But by the time you're at endgame, you can very easily put your character in a state where they will be one-shot by a lot of mechanics. Mechanics that a lower-level character won't be killed by because they'll have more health.
Huh. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I still see that question all the time. And you know, after this podcast has even been beneficial for me, because now that you've thoroughly explained that concept in this format before, I feel a lot more comfortable in kind of giving people a quick synopsis of that and saying, no, go play something you like, because you're going to actually learn more from it, instead of, like we've discussed, the Dolmen grind. I combine Dolmen grind. Now the
golems are coming for us.
I'm broken now. But anyway, okay. we said that that's terrible, because you're going out there, you're killing things, but you're not learning anything, and I agree with that. So you get there, you lose all these perks, these buffs, and then you're getting your butt kicked by one-shot mechanics.
Yeah.
So teach us, Stark. Teach us the things.
Well, okay. So the thing we're looking at right now are going to be what these attributes actually do.
Okay.
Because when you're first starting out, you have fairly decent magicka and stamina pools, fairly decent health pool, and it doesn't really matter. So you can do whatever you want. And especially for new players, you can get this sense that, well, I'm not running out of stamina, I'm not running out of magicka, so I'm just going to use both.
Yeah.
And by the time you're getting to endgame, and you've seen this by now, that's a mistake.
Oh, yeah.
So hybrids are viable under two very specific circumstances. They work in PvP, and they work on tanks, especially on tanks, because you don't care about how much damage is going out. You do want both pools. Okay, and I think we discussed tanks before, didn't we?
I don't know that we've done it in as much detail as we should have. Like, we must not have, because I'm still a little in the dark. Like, I've heard you via Twitch stream and many other different sources talk about them, and I see people playing tanks, but I don't know that we've actually gone into the detail we might want to.
Okay, so we'll probably want to do that in the future at some point. But the basic idea is that with tanks, the amount of damage you're putting out doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Because that's not your job. Your job is to keep everybody else alive. And at that moment, having access to both pools can be very beneficial.
Right.
And tanks have another trick up their sleeve that we're going to come back to in a minute. But for the short term, when you're trying to play the game, you do want to come up with an idea of whether you be primarily magicka based, so a mage, or primarily stamina based, so usually a sort of rogue type.
Yeah.
If you're a healer, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, because you just triggered something in me that I had a little bit of. You are right. I'm not saying that's the wrong way to summarize it, but I was having a little bit of a conscience moment when I was creating this new Templar that I just leveled during the Witches Festival, and I thought he was gonna. You're right. He is more of a mage. He's magicka. But it is interesting, some of the spells in the game still work as though they're melee spells. And so I guess maybe if someone's coming into this brand new, you should take a second and say, your mage can still be kind of a melee mage in a way. That's
and a lot of us, no, it's not a bad way to say it. It's also not true. It's especially true of DKs. Magicka-based DKs tend to get very close to their targets.
Right.
They don't even... They don't even get out of melee for the most part. And I was going to say that, and I was like, yeah, they did get a specific change with the last patch, where now one of their passives, I can't remember which one it is, extends the range of their melee attacks. So that's really interesting from a gameplay perspective, because it gives them a lot more flexibility, but it is still acknowledging a lot of the most dangerous stuff a DK is going to be doing as a magicka DPS is going to be getting close, pounding on people. So, yeah, and I think you're right. Like, phrasing it as a rogue might be a little wrong, but you are going to be one of these sort of frontline combatants, skirmisher types.
Yeah. I mean, it's so 50-50, right? We're picking such straws, and I only wanted to do it because it's just I got to witness it so much recently. You know, that Templar is still up there using not biting jabs, but whatever his stabby spear thing is, and I'm like, well, okay, I feel more melee than I thought I was going to feel. I was hesitant to make another mage guy who's standing lobbing balls of magic.
And then and Templars are great for that because you get healing back from that.
Right. So sorry, I wasted.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's fine. Like it's legitimate perspective in when you're trying to decide what you're going to do with the game. And of course, something else we've mentioned before, but we'll just cover it again right now, is if you're playing a character one way and you decide, no, I really want to take this skill set and just switch it around and go the other direction, you can't.
Oh yeah.
Fully respecking your character is fairly cheap.
Oh yeah, it really is.
In-game gold. So it's using in-game gold. Not even I would not recommend spending money to get respec scrolls unless you spend all your time in PvP and have no gold whatsoever. But even then, it's easy enough to get the gold to respec at end game that I really would recommend. If you get bored with a character, even if you just get bored and you're not enjoying it as much, feel free to experiment with it and do something else, because each of the classes can do anything you want with it role wise.
And I've said this before, and I know this isn't the topic of this episode necessarily, so I won't waste too much time, but it is super easy to re-roll. Like what I just did to explain, because I've said, hey, I made this Templar, and 3 weeks ago I was talking about my Warden, but basically what I did is I've gravitated towards healing. I always ask people, they come in, they say, Kyle, what should I play? What class race should I do? And I say, well, what do you want to do? Do you want a DPS? Do you want a tank? Do you want to heal? What's your thing? And then, ask further questions from there. And so mine's healing. So I start with a Nightblade healer, which is very off meta. Then I went with a Warden healer, which is more on point. And then now I've done the Templar healer, which is extremely kind of, the meta, the preferred healer type. Again, you can do whatever you want, but I wanted to experiment with all of them and see. So... like you're saying, Stark, you get bored, you can either respec, you can re-roll a new person, you can do anything you want.
Yep. Yeah, I guess a lot of stuff does just carry over across multiple characters. There's a lot of account progression as opposed to character progression. And
that ties in with scaling, too. I mean, I guess I thought I was going way off base, but, every time you start a new character... you are getting it with the training wheels, and you get to unlock their spells one at a time and experiment with them. I think that this Templar is going to be the first character I have. This is going to be my first character to have unlocked all of his natural, his class-specific skills. My Nightblade and my Warden still have class-specific skills that are locked because I've just not gotten into that tree far enough. But it's interesting, and that I guess I wouldn't have gotten there had I not decided to re-roll and play with this scaling system. In truth, So back on track.
No, that's cool. It's cool. So one of the first things you're going to see at the beginning of the game is you got 3 attributes. It's borrowing the same systems from Skyrim. You have magicka, you have health, and you have stamina. And especially if you're coming from Skyrim, it can be a little bit deceptive because in that game, what those 3 stats did is they increased that stat, nothing else, with one exception for stamina in Skyrim. Worry about. That's not true in ESO at all, because those stats, specifically stamina and magicka, will scale the effectiveness of all of your abilities that cast off of that. Again, with a few exceptions, and we're going to detail that in a moment. So if you want to be a caster, you're going to want to dump as many of your points into magicka as you feel comfortable with. Realistically, at least 40, and probably all of them, all 64 points.
Yeah.
And the reason is that will increase the damage of your magicka-based abilities. So if you're using those Templar abilities you were just talking about, those scale off of your magicka. They scale off of your spell damage too. And they crit based on your spell crit. If you are trying to play a stam character, you're going to want to put those points in stamina, and you're going to want to focus on weapon damage, because magicka-based abilities will not scale for you. They won't. It's not really viable to try to split and go both ways,
right?
Because you will harm your overall damage output too much.
You do really end up handicapping yourself, huh? Because you're going very 50-50, and then you wind up with meh magic. Yeah,
there's diminishing returns to overall the whole system, but you still end up, like, you take a 30 or 40% effectiveness hit.
Can I also chime in that, you know, some abilities in the game will say you will get a return based on whatever pool is larger. I can't think of which
there's
one
a few
exactly,
of those.
Some of those, it might be Warden, might be even Templar.
I'm looking at a Warden right now. Yeah, one of them is Nature's Gift. These numbers are going to be low, but when you heal an ally with a green balance ability, so their entire healing line, you gain magicka or stamina, whichever resource pool is lower. I think that one actually focuses on the one that's been more depleted, as opposed to which one has a max lower. But yeah, so.
One thing maybe, and also I was going to say this before you move on, but for beginners, you know, you said put 64 points well, you said you're going to eventually want to have 64 points into Magicka if you want to play a magic character. And I definitely agree with that. My one suggestion maybe for people that are newer in playing, one thing that I still do when I'm creating a new character, just because I mean, I don't want to get my butt kicked on stream so much. I'll often put, I'll put maybe my first 3 or so points into my primary stat, so it'd be magicka or stamina. But then I'll slowly, every once in a while, put an extra point into health up to like 4, and then usually I end up respecing that when I get to max level, like when I'm actually ready to do real content that's harder. But it just it can be, you know, if you guys are out there in the field and you're dying because you're learning mechanics and you're learning your class, that there's nothing wrong with putting a couple points into there. Realistically, maybe only 4 to 5 in health, because you still want that oomph for your major pull, but that'll give you a little extra health to survive. You're not going to get your butt kicked as quickly.
So this is one of these things where it's kind of like do as I say, not as I do, because what I tend to do is put about 16 points in health for stam.
Wow. Okay.
I get a lot of stam off of my enchantments, and rather than mess around with a mix of stam and health enchantments to bring my max health up, I usually just use my stats to do that for me.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. I didn't expect to hear 16 from you.
Yeah.
Look, I learned things on this show. That's the real takeaway from today.
Yeah. And depending on the race, it can vary a little bit, because if you're playing something like an Imperial or massive health bonus to start with, it's a little less critical, because if I do that on an Imperial and then I put them in Dubious Camoran Throne, I can have a Stam Blade running with 25k health.
Wow.
And that's a little overkill, but yeah, I tend to get my max health up using just putting the points in and not worrying about anything else. That's usually flipped. A lot of people will say put all 64 points in the pool and then bring your health up using enchants. And that is good advice, because when you're playing through more difficult content, you do need some health. Every piece of content in the game has a one-shot threshold. If your health is below this, normal enemies can kill you in one hit, and bosses can kill you with a light attack. For example, and I might be slightly off on this, but White Gold Tower on normal has a one-shot threshold of about 13k. If you've got somebody, you're going in there with 12k health, they're going to get one shot by the boss, and they're going to get killed by the ads. And I've seen this happen.
That's something I need to pay attention to, because that's something I have not done until this point, Stark. I have not enchanted anything with health, and I guess my Stamplar, or I'm sorry, my Magplar right now is rocking his still. I didn't unspec his 4 health points, so that are attribute points in health. But okay, you're giving me things. I'm learning.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering. I hear this one so much. I say this one so much, but if you've got a dead DPS, their actual DPS is 0. So yeah, it's more important to stay alive and be able to continue to do damage while you're up than it is to simply have an amazing parse. And this is something that comes out in a lot of in-game content, where you've got people who spend a lot of time working on their parse, and they have really amazing parse numbers, and they never learn the mechanics because their parse is so amazing, and then they're dead.
Actually, I can attest to that directly, because we were running a lot of vets the past couple days on stream, and great friend of mine who runs with us almost every time we do vets, he was doing a very glass cannon build, and to the point that as soon as he would start to take damage, he was dead before I could even react to put a heal in his area. And you know, and I'm not the best healer, but I'm sufficient. I can do vets pretty damn well, but I mean, he was just getting nuked, and so he actually went and changed, and it was a night to day sort of difference, because now it was like, oh yeah, great, you're taking a hit, I can heal you through that, no problemo. But the difference is if you die in less than a second, there's not much the human body can do about that.
Well, and in this case, when I'm talking like the one-shot threshold, it's not even going to matter, because there's nothing you can do.
Definitely
I've watched the Adjudicator, so the first fight in White Gold on normal, just turn around and take down DPS in one light attack, and then go right back to the tank, because they can pick a target sometimes and they can just go, yeah, I'm not going to care. I don't care about the taunt. I'm just going to hit that guy once, just lightly tap them. Oh, look, they're dead. My day got better. So yeah, you do want to make sure you've got a certain, usually the magic number is somewhere around 17K.
So I'm a little under that, I think.
Yeah. For Stam DPS anyway, it's usually around 17K. For Mag DPS, it used to be lower. So before Meier, the advice would have been, don't worry about your health, because you're just going to use Annulment and Harness Magicka. And if you're a Sork, you're going to be using Conjured War. And it's really not going to matter. You're going to have these massive shields floating around. Those now scale based on, they don't scale, they limit based on your max health. So now you've got a lot of Magicka players who are starting to have to adapt to a world where their shields are not absolutely amazing. And they're going to need to put some points in health too. So for them, I'd guess a number, but the truth is Stam runs at around 17k DPS, 17k health, and that's probably a little overkill for Magicka if you're still trying to keep your shields up all the time, but it'll still help.
Oh, and here's something to say. So this is directly tied back to scaling. For someone that's listening to this conversation and Stark's recommendation of 17k health, and you're saying, yeah, but you dummies, like, come on, my level 15 Nightblade's got 25k health. What are you talking about? How bad are you? That is scaling right there, because you are level, whatever number you want to throw out there, level 15, and you've got 30k health. That is directly the scaling right there. You are seeing that, because once you get closer to 50, your health is actually going to go down. And I've had someone complain about this system in stream before. I personally am a huge fan of the training wheel system. I like the scaling because it gives you that flexibility at the early game where you can take some punches while you're still figuring out, what does this skill actually do? It says a lot of text there, but how do I make it function in the field? That gives you that viability to play around. But once you hit level cap, level 50, you're going to see, okay, my health's a lot lower. This is why I need to know my skills so I can put on a shield if my character's got a shield. I can do this, do that, do this. It's, in my opinion, I see a lot of benefit from this. I think this is very friendly to new players. So it's something I give ESO a lot of credit for.
Yeah, it is something that seems a little weird when you first hear it, because it's like, oh, wait, I level up so my character gets weaker? What? But it is strange. It's not something you're used to seeing. But it does something else that's really difficult to do otherwise, which is you take a normal game where it starts out easier and then gets harder progressively as you go through. That's a normal difficulty curve.
Yep.
It's recreating that without having to change the level of the enemies ever.
Yeah.
Also, we were talking about health a second ago. Like, what are we talking about having low health? I'm sitting here logged in on the PTS. I've got a character that is CP 810 with no points spent in anything.
Whoa, okay.
Do you know what her health is?
No.
8,744.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that's below all the one-shot.
That's going to be, I think I can survive an overland with that, but yeah, it's low. So yeah, when we're talking about make sure you do have a certain amount of health, and there's a lot of wiggle room on that exact number, especially based on what you're doing. Please make sure you've got some health.
Yeah, I think my guy runs with about 15k right now as the healer.
Yeah.
But now I used, I'm sorry, this is getting into the weeds, but I use the double bubble, whatever the healing reward morph is, the one that bubbles me and them. So I'm often running with a shield on myself, almost constant uptime on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that helps because, again, it's... this is actually saving me from something. The changes in Murkmire saved me from having to explain shields in excruciating detail because it is basically just extra hit points now that you can slap on your character.
Right.
It used to be there were a lot of special rules, and I was not looking forward to having to go through all of them. So I guess I don't have to now because that's all part of the history.
Thanks, Os.
The current game.
Save Stark some time.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Let's go back to your great show notes here that are actually sensical.
Yeah. So this is the basic setup, though, is your magic, your stamina, and in some cases your health will scale how effective your abilities are. We'll get into the health is kind of a special case because it only happens a few times. Each class has one. Beyond that, you also have your recovery rates. So health and stamina recovery are very useful for what's called sustain, your ability to continue fighting through content. And there's, as far as I know, almost nothing that scales with those. They're useful to have, incredibly useful to have, but they don't actually make your abilities more effective on their own. They just let you use them often.
Okay.
Then we have weapon and spell damage. So this is another thing you're probably pretty familiar with at this point. Just like your max magic and your max stamina, these also scale your light attacks, your heavy attacks, and all of your abilities that cast with that damage type, right? With that pool. I say damage type like that's the thing. With that pool. Now, the hard part with weapon and spell damage is when you equip a weapon, it will boost both.
Oh, okay.
So that's why you don't see something like a staff with spell damage buff on it as the base text. It's weapon damage. And the reason is that stat buffs both. It's actually a separate effect. It'll just say damage, I think. I say that, and then I realize, oh, wait, I'm actually a thing where I can check that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so your weapon will actually increase both. Yeah, it just says damage. It doesn't specify. So damage will increase both your weapon and your spell damage.
Okay.
This also factors into overall scaling. So if you've got even healing spells, like, Vigor, Shrooms, like the healing spores from the Warden, your weapon will make those more effective.
Got it. Yep, that makes sense.
And then your max pool will also increase the effectiveness of it. Again, Zos doing something nice. There used to be a different formula for how damage was calculated with your light and heavy attacks versus your abilities. That was changed with Somerset so that it's now universal. So it's just like, okay, well, it scales in the same way that the others do. So that's no longer...
Yeah, sounds complicated. I wouldn't have liked that.
Yeah, it's a nice change. And then you've also got crit severity and crit severity and crit chance. So crit severity you basically never see. It's not on your character sheet. Crit damage, crit is. So the spell crit or the weapon crit, that does show up. Those will start at 10% no matter what you do. And once you've gotten to a certain point in spending points in the champion stars, you're going to see those go to, I think it's 19 now. It used to be 22. But that's something that you'll run across later on. What this does is when you make an attack or cast a healing spell or anything that applies either damage or healing, you have a chance to crit, which modifies the amount it does by an additional 50%. So it multiplies by 1.5.
Okay.
Severity adds to it adds to that number. So if you have plus 10% crit severity from something, I think that's the Nightblades, then that will be multiplied by 1.6. Also, and this is one of these things where Zeos made my life a little difficult, it no longer applies to healing. So severity no longer modifies your healing, just your damage out. I think that was because it was a little absurd at times. I also cannot remember if shields can still crit or cast. I know that at one point it was possible for your spell crit to cause your shields to crit, and you'd get an even larger shield for the duration.
Wow.
Yeah, you can see why that went away.
Yeah, I can.
I also can't remember when that was changed. So that's been a while. Yeah, so this is this is the basic for weapon damage out, and this is the stuff where if you're trying to build a character and you're trying to play, you do kind of need to understand what all these do, especially because in the game, DPS is very crit focused in PvE. In PvP, you're going to be dealing with players who have crit resist, overland mobs, bosses, PvE content. None of that can crit you. Other players can. And so the crit resist stat is there to mitigate that. I forget exactly how the math works on crit resist. You want more of it, but I don't remember exactly why and how much.
Okay. Yeah, that's having a golden number there is probably...
It's not very easy to stack a lot for reference, and the easiest way and sufficient way is usually simply impenetrable.
Oh, okay, right, on gear.
Yeah, so you go into so that's entirely a gear solution. You go into PvP, you want it because you want your crit resist.
Right.
But beyond that, there are a few ways you can get it. You can get it from a set, which the name's escaping me, that used to be a battleground set. I believe it's now under somewhere. And you can get crit resist from a champion point star that caps at about 12, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So there are other sources of crit resist, but usually the trick is just run impen gear, and that covers you for that. So probably going to rotate from this into the resistances quickly.
Sure.
So you've got, because we're just going to cover the attributes here and then move on to how this affects scaling. These are not as critical for understanding scaling. Your spell resist and your physical resist on your character, those affect taking incoming damage from either damage that was caused by somebody using magic abilities or stamina abilities. Now, for the most part, they will raise together. So like when you put on a piece of armor, the resistance stat on it, the armor stat on it will actually apply to both pools. However, when you get further into the game, especially when you're looking at things like champion points, you'll see stuff that will only raise one of them.
Okay.
Medium armor focus, for example, is only physical resistance.
Oh. Right.
You can get spell resistance by itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the exact same system. It's right there. It's in the same tree as medium focus, in fact. But you're raising that separately. This creates a situation that's not immediately apparent, where heavy armor is better suited for dealing with physical threats, and light armor is actually better for dealing with magical threats.
Yeah, because I guess I've seen that passive in there, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, overall, heavy armor is significantly in general, and that does still apply, but you get the idea. So it's not like, oh, hey, I'm going to tank something magical, I should put light armor on. You shouldn't. But if you're in light armor and somebody's coming after you with a staff, you're going to be in better shape than if they're coming after you with a sword.
Right.
Yeah. I think that about covers that one. So we get into the scaling stuff. Yeah. This is where stuff.
Because resistance.
This is where stuff gets weird.
Right. Resistances make a fair amount of sense, I think. And, I'd be curious to know if anyone has further questions. Like you said, there's kind of some caps out there in the world that would, or some certain numbers you want to hit, I should say. Yeah. But by and large, you can see those passives and you can see that.
Yeah, I probably should throw that number out there just for completeness right now. The magic number with resistances is about 32,000. I think it's 32,800 specifically.
I'd be curious to see what I have.
When you exceed that, you don't get any benefit from beyond it.
Oh, so what was it again? 3,200?
32,000. No, 32,000.
32,000. Okay.
800. Well, so this is going into mitigation briefly, but your armor has a limited amount of incoming damage you can mitigate. That goes to 50%. That's the magic number where you hit 50% mitigation.
Got it. Okay.
This is something where PvP follows different rules, because in PvP you can deal with enemy armor penetration, and at that point, if you have armor above cap, penetration will subtract off of that, and you can still be at cap in some rare situations. But PvP is its own weird little animal. We might come back to that someday, but for the moment, just gonna stick a pin in that and say, when you're looking at PvE content, you're trying to stack resistance above 32k, it does not matter.
Interesting. I am learning. This is some more dense. We said at the top. This is going to be some numbers here, but okay, that gives me some areas to aim for in perfecting or tweaking my characters. End game sort of play.
Oh, there's also one really interesting thing here that's because I actually broke down the damage types where they're normally resisted. That's not entirely true, but they're normally resisted. But there is one special case here with damage type. Oblivion damage does not care what you do. It doesn't care what you're trying to resist. It will just apply itself in full.
Oh.
It gets used for two things. It gets used for some one-shot mechanics, and it gets used in PvP to deal with players that stack resistances to the point where they're unkillable. So Oblivion damage bypasses shields.
Oof.
It ignores damage resistances. It's just, oh, hey, you're having a day? Let's end that.
Oh, no. I didn't know that. So my current staffs that I got out of a White Gold Tower have Oblivion damage.
Yeah, that's it's very useful for PvP.
Interesting.
Because, again, if you're dealing with players who have very little health but have a lot of survivability, then Oblivion will just cut right through it. It's been the bane of shield users for a while.
Wow.
Because it does not care. Once it gets applied. And ironically, Murkmire made life worse for them because it used to be your shields would at least provide resistance and protection from having enchants applied to you. Doesn't work anymore. So you'll start taking damage from those Oblivion enchants.
So that's why all the
you.
shield users are crying themselves to sleep these days.
That's why the ones in PvP are. Yeah.
Oh my. Well, that's good to know. I had no idea that that's how Oblivion worked. I guess I hadn't seen Oblivion resistance listed anywhere, and I just never thought of it really. Yeah,
because there are 8 common damage types in the game, and here's just this one that's out by itself that doesn't look like it connects to anything because it specifically doesn't connect to anything.
I'm learning.
It's easy to miss.
I'm learning. Okay, scaling, Stark.
Okay, so we sort of covered all of this a minute ago.
We did.
We did. Except your active abilities are the ones that scale. So I'm on a Warden right now, and if I look at the window, look at the skill list, I get stuff like fungal growth, shrooms. That's going to scale based on max magicka. It's going to scale based on spell damage, right?
Yeah.
And it's got a morph. So when it hits 4 and maxes out, you can then switch it over. You can actually change it so it scales off of weapon damage and max stamina. And that'll also change the stat that crits it also. So that makes sense, right?
Yeah, that does.
But then you go down into the pool below that, and you look at these passives, and this was probably the wrong pool to look at because most of these things I know for a fact don't scale on anything. You'll get these things where it's like a passive will modify something or deal a kind of damage in rare cases. And those don't scale with your attributes or your max weapon damage unless they specifically say, get an additional something %. They won't scale. A good example that does scale, and everybody sees these, are your racial passives, where it's like gain additional max stamina by a certain percentage. That will somewhat obviously scale with how high your max stamina is, because the percentage will be larger. But you will not see, and I should clarify it, because I'm looking at an Imperial, so the first point in conditioning is +4 max stamina. It's always going to be +4 max stamina. But +4% max stamina is going to be a much larger number when you've got 30k base stamina than as opposed to when you have 10k. Oh. That makes sense?
Yes, it does. It does. Took me a second to wrap my brain around numbers. Any numbers, that is.
Yeah. So the basic setup here is your passives will not scale with your attributes.
Right.
Same thing is true of sets that deal damage or sets that modify things. With, again, the specific exception of sets that are like, okay, you have your max magicka, we'll give you another +8% to it or something like that. With that specific exception. So if you got a set like Veladreth, where it's like, okay, it deals disease damage and it fires these spores that deal disease damage at everybody in front of you. That's not going to scale with your max magicka. It's not going to scale with your max stamina. It's not going to scale with either of your damage stats.
Okay.
It has a base value. It does scale with champion points. And the same thing is true for a lot of passives and classes
Oh.
that modify specific values.
Okie doke.
So that we'll come back to in a second when we get to it. There are a few special cases on scalings. So things to provide major or minor buffs don't usually scale. Again, they're percentage based, so the larger the base value is, the larger the benefit, but you're not going to be able to adjust those up. So major brutality is always going to be plus 20% weapon damage. It doesn't matter if your weapon damage is 1200 or 3600.
Okay.
There are a handful of abilities. This is another one of these weird cases. There are a handful of abilities that are free. One of the good examples of this is Meditate in the Sigic line. And if you go and look at it, what you'll see is it doesn't actually list an attribute cost on it. And in this case, it doesn't scale with anything.
Oh, good point. Okay. I didn't even think about those.
Yeah. I can only think of like 3 or 4 abilities that work that way.
I mean,
they don't have
would that also apply to the Warden's Netch that he calls out too? I mean, that doesn't cost anything. No,
it doesn't, because the Netch is kind of a special case. And that's because even though you're right. It doesn't have a cost. I forgot. It had that cut out. So yeah, no, you're right.
Yes.
So it shouldn't scale with that. Yeah, you're correct. It shouldn't scale with anything.
Someone note that, please.
Someone note that.
Yeah.
I made a mistake.
Wow. Sorry.
You want to think, yeah. So yeah, so the Netch should not have scaling with anything. And actually looking at the numbers right now, if it does scale with something, it's in the champion trees.
Aha, that makes sense.
I can verify that in a second.
The illustrious champion points that we're going to be talking about. A system that I am not 100% in love with, and I don't know if we'll have time for commentary on that, because we're in the last...
It's getting a little long.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, and I just checked. You're right. Betty Netch does not scale.
Woohoo!
On points of Magicka, it's still the same value.
Well, I've been right about exactly one thing in all of ESO, everyone, and that is it.
Also other things, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so the free abilities don't. The other thing that kicks around, you'll run across occasionally, abilities that scale with your max health. So, for example, looking at Arctic Wind, which is, it heals you for 15% of your max health, additional chunk for each second. I thought it was 30%. No, whatever. It heals you for a chunk of your max health and then heals you for more of your max health over time. Each of the classes has at least one self-heal that scales off your max health. In these cases, it's specifically designed for tanks. You'll have a lot of health. You'll have terrible self-heals because your resource pools are going to be small.
Yep.
So here you go. Have a self-heal. There's also at least one shield that's health scaling for everybody, and that's in Undaunted. Usually you have better options to grab, but Bone Shield is based on a percentage of your max health.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen Bone Shield, and I've never taken it or used it at all before.
Well, you haven't tanked, so that kind of helps.
That explains why. But yeah. I've always looked at it because I'm like, that looks like it would be a neat skill. But
it is. It's a really neat one within its field. Let's see, where are we? Yeah. So those are the major things with special cases of figuring out what's going to scale.
Yeah.
Most of the time, you can actually tell at a glance what a spell is going to scale off of simply by looking at what the cost is. If it's a stamina cost, it's going to be your max stamina. If it's a magicka cost, it's going to be your max magicka.
Yeah, and once you get into that mindset, it is, like you said, it's pretty easy to figure that out.
Yeah, and it's sort of this thing where I make the mistake of not bringing it up much sooner because, well, of course it works that way, right?
Right.
All right, I need to actually say that. Yeah.
Well, and I don't know, we may have kind of alluded to it in the past where if you are getting someone into ESO bare bones, they know nothing about the game, arguably, but not making the game impossible by any means, but it is slightly easier to go with a magicka build from the start because no one starts with stamina abilities that I know of, and that's always a morph. So the idea that, you know, if you that could be confusing for someone that might know half of the information that we're teaching is, if you're starting the game, you're saying, okay, I'm going to make this a stamina night blade. But wait, all my abilities to start are all magicka. So should I be putting my points into magicka, or I'm going to be stamina by tomorrow when I'm, playing my spells will have morphed and they're going to be stamina based. And so that could be a confusing factor. And that's why stamina is just a tiny smidge more complicated than it is to be magicka from the very start.
Also because there's no basic UI system that will tell you that this ability has a stamina morph and that one does not.
That is very true. The morph system is hidden, for lack of a better word. I think that might be the perfect word, actually. It's just hidden until you get either an add-on that still requires you to spec into the skill to begin with, but that does require you go and look at some other websites, like the online Wikipedia for ESO, and kind of figure some things out.
Yeah, in normal gameplay, it's not until you actually hit 4 and then max it out again.
Yeah.
So basically you reach 5 and it's like, okay, this ability's ready to be morphed. And then you discover, oh wait, I can turn these into stamina abilities. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's certainly something that I could see a lot of people missing on the way through. And it is very... There's also a special weird case here where some abilities like Falcon's Swiftness, again, I'm looking at a warden in front of me right now. It's a magicka cost ability, but it's very useful for stam build. And this gets back into understanding how scaling works. So I'm going to read this.
Okay.
Invoke the Spirit of Agility to gain Major Expedition for 4 seconds and Major Endurance for 10 seconds, increasing your movement speed by 30% and your stamina recovery by 20%.
Well, yeah.
So you're paying magicka for this, right?
Right.
But it increases your stamina recovery and it increases your movement speed. Mm-hmm. And then one of the morphs now, it used to be part of this, one of the morphs would add Major Evasion, and the other one would add Minor Brutality. And now those just are active passively while it's slotted. So what this ability does is every single effect on it is a major or minor buff. Mm-hmm. They don't scale. So you have this thing that's a very useful utility power for a warden. Uh-huh. The ability to move around faster, especially for a stand build where you're probably going to be melee, or you need to be away from something trying to kill you if you're ranged. And it's costing from the pool you don't care about.
That's a great point.
And there are several classes that have abilities like this, where it's like, I'm going to pay magicka for this ability. I don't care that it's costing magicka. I don't care about the scaling because there is no scaling.
Right.
A similar example, which actually does have scaling, is Green Dragon Blood for the Dragon Knight, where it'll heal based on a percentage of the damage you've received, and it will give you, again, Major Endurance. So you get stamina back, like over time, but you get stamina back, and you get an instant heal. And it costs magicka, but you don't care about that because it's boosting your effectiveness as a stam DPS.
That does make sense to me. Just to throw this out there, Stark, because I don't know how much time you want to spend on champion points. They're a larger system. We are getting a little late into the episode. So do you want to spend a little more time on scaling and go into detail on this and then tackle champion points fresh next week? Or do you want to try and do...
That might be a plan, actually.
Because this has been good content in terms of like, these are some things that we... admittedly, for very, very clear reasons, we've kind of skipped over because we were busy giving the larger concepts, and yet some of it, like saying, hey, yeah, actually, if you're curious what your morphs are going to be, go Google them because it will tell you. We've missed out on some of those things, which are still very important to learning what you're doing. So I could see more value because I'd like to spend some time on the champion point system. It's not as obvious as it seems. It's sometimes. And it's something that people won't really need to worry about until they hit level 50. That's when you'll be introduced to the champion point system.
I'd actually argue with champion points, you don't really need to worry about too much until about 300. Because you'll keep spending points as you get them, sort of naturally going, oh, hey, here's a thing, and chase that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually needing to engage with the system and understand how champion point system works as a whole, that's something that only really starts to kick in once you're looking at vet content and saying, okay, I want to go run that. And that's the other thing about this thing. Part of the reason why the scaling has been put off this long is, as a new player, it doesn't matter. if you started at the same time we started broadcasting, started recording these and running with this stuff, this wouldn't have been useful information to you.
Right.
Because you're currently at a level where this is the kind of advice that gives people a very weird, very distorted view of how the game works before you actually come to grips with the systems. This is the stuff you need to understand when you're looking at your character. Like, okay, I want to clean it up a bit, and I want to start tackling content. And that's also true when we were talking about max health a minute ago. Because max health, when I'm saying like, oh yeah, I want 17 max health minimum, I'm talking about vet dungeons. I'm talking about vet trials where I need another 1,000 on top of that. If you're running normal, 15 is more than enough.
Yeah. See, that's why although this episode has kind of moved around a bit, and I don't want to say it's been our least cohesive, but we've really, but it's kind of been a catch-all for a lot of content that is very applicable, and yet I feel like
hard
this is
to categorize.
Yes, it is. It really is. And this is the stuff that, like I said, you taught me some things in here. Like, I didn't know that about Oblivion damage, because unless you are maybe as dedicated to the forums as you are, if I've played as long as you have, for someone like me that's been in here 5 months now, maybe something 4 or 5 months, it's not very obvious. Like, I don't know, unless I was reading something in depth, I probably wouldn't have heard about the Oblivion damage thing. It's just not something that pings you in game. Like,
yeah,
hey.
Or if you go back, and again, something we mentioned way back in the day, where it's like, look at what's being used to kill you. Look at the specific damage type call outs.
Yeah,
it does show up there. It does show up there, but it's really easy to miss. Again, if you're just thinking, oh yeah, it's just another type of damage. Okay, well, whatever, I can just soak through that. Then it doesn't work. Well, here's why. And something worth pointing out, I've seen it a few times. There are also things in the game, in PvE, where an enemy or a boss will deal damage based on your max health. So they'll deal a certain amount of damage to you based on what your max health stat is. So it's either never going to be a one-shot, or will always be a one-shot, usually as punishment for failing to deal with the mechanic. So that's also a thing that exists, and part of the reason why understanding how scaling works is a little important, because this stuff will get used against you too.
Yeah. Anything else you want to kind of leave them with the idea of scaling? Any of these topics we didn't really get into that you wanted to dive further? We probably have about 10 minutes or so to do that. Anything?
No, I think we covered most of this. Well, okay. I think we covered most of this about as cohesively as we could without digging each of these out and trying to turn each one into a separate episode.
Yeah.
It is important to dig through when you're digging through this stuff, and especially if you're even just dealing with overland content, you're going to see better damage output picking a focus.
Right.
And you do see a lot of players suffer. They grab heavy armor because, hey, no, I wanted to do this kind of, heavy armor warrior thing from one of the other games, and it doesn't work. And part of the reason is because heavy armor is really a hybrid system.
You're right.
When you look at that.
That is the crossroads between Oblivion, Skyrim to Elder Scrolls Online. That Elder Scrolls Online is more MMO. I mean, it is an MMO, so it obeys MMO traditions where, you've got to apply the set that is made for that role. Whereas you're right, you can easily create a heavy armored mage in Skyrim, and he's got a lot of magic power. He's got a lot of health because he's got strong armor. But you're right, you do run into issues in here where your passives aren't always applicable as much. It's a good point, but you're right. And there's still areas for that in PvP, I think, as you've called out, healers in PvP using heavy armor because they don't want to be nuked down as quickly and stuff like that. But
well, and there's this hilarious thing where the entire idea of a tank in MMO is a very sort of metagaming concept, even from RPGs, where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to antagonize the boss and they'll pound on me while everybody else goes after that. That works fine when you're dealing with an AI controlled.
Yep.
When you're dealing with living opponents, living players, then you end up in a situation where it's like, oh, wait, no, screw that guy in particular, because if they die, everybody else goes.
Right.
So there is a point where you're building a healer for PvP where, like, okay, well, I need to focus on survival.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be better at taunting the other players than a theoretical tank would. Legitimate thing, legitimate way to play the game, to approach the game. Because if you don't deal with the healer, your day is going to be miserable.
So maybe that's another
PvP.
basic call out, is to say, we've given a lot of traditional PvE advice today. That idea. Well, actually, yes, that ties back to one of our very first points of saying, hey, if you're playing as a Magicka character, you're going to want to stack all your points into Magicka, for example, as a healer. But, you might be switching that system up a little bit if you're doing PvE or PvP. I'm sorry. Maybe you are focusing more on health, because you're right. And just like you said, DPS stop doing DPS when they're dead, surprisingly. Healers stop dropping heals when their health hits 0. I learned recently.
So it's a good so there's a good goal if you're in PvP. Make sure the healer dies.
Yeah. Oh, I feel so educated, Stark. I feel about as educated as my brain can absorb today. Let's put it that way. So this is good to break up the champion point system, because I was just looking at the notes, and you might have seen me typing in there, but I added some more basics or just a tiny line of basics to champion points, because champion points are something that once you unlock them on one character, they lock across all of them.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't even...
Well, that was something... We mentioned that, though, in passing. Like, we didn't point that one out. We're talking about how the game is very
yeah.
If you've got a character at level 50 and you've spent some time there and back out and you're like, I want to try something different character, all your champion points are available to both characters. And this creates a situation where if you're on a lowbie character, but you're on an account that has high CP, you're going to have even bigger stat pools, and you're going to have much more focused monsters attached to your character. Like if you've got plus 20% to direct damage or plus 20% to your light and heavy attacks on a new level 3 character, yeah, it's going to be great for you. So it'll speed up the process of getting to 50, because you're going to be doing more damage. You're going to be taking less damage from other sources, depending on how you've allocated your CP.
That's a good point.
It's really kind of hilariously difficult to get an exact feeling for somebody who's new to the game until you either deliberately don't spend your CP on a low-level character, or you start a new account, because so much stuff carries over and is useful, and is just right there in the UI saying, hey, you want to spend these points? Yeah.
Yes.
Why would I want to suffer?
Right. I didn't know that at first when I rolled into the second character, that I could spend champion points right away. It took me, I mean, I didn't go very far without figuring it out, but I was like, oh, right. Look at, okay.
Yep.
Well, Stark, thank you very much for all this information this week. This is a lot of good content for people, and I hope it's been helpful to people out there that are, like I said, we always get someone saying, hey, thanks so much. I never realized this was a thing. I've been playing for 4 years, but I didn't know that that's how this worked. And hopefully some of this is, relevant, because I could see that. I could see a lot of the stuff we talked about today being kind of maybe more slightly hidden concepts. If you're not out there fetching this information actively, you're probably not hearing about it any other way. So take that, try and apply some of it. Let us know if you have any questions. You can always come by the Twitch stream or message us on Twitter, send us an email if you have any questions or want us to dive maybe deeper into any of these topics, because well, some of the information's out there. Some of it's, I'm sure, slightly hidden. Some of these mechanics are a little bit less obvious. But let us know. The Twitch for me is twitch.tv/Kyle Dempster Studios. We actually just got put onto the ESO stream team, which is super cool. So huge thank you to Zoss and all their awesome members over there. That means we can give away cool things like torch bugs and crown packs and Somerset copies. And so come by the stream if you want some giveaways. I think Gina said I'll start getting those codes. She'll get them to me sometime this week. So we might even have some to give away this weekend.
Yeah. Congrats.
Thank you very much. That is super exciting. I mean, they're just an amazing team, and I wouldn't.
They really are.
I would not blow smoke. I love to drag companies when they're shitty, and I got to say they aren't anything but.
No, they're definitely not that. They're fantastic.
Definitely not.
Gina is really a fantastic person.
She is, and can I say, like, to everyone out there, and I know, again, this sounds like brown nosing, but it isn't. But like last night I got kicked off of I got kicked off of ESO just because, like, servers were kind of booting people for whatever reason. And it was like they have a private Discord, and I got in there. I'm like, hey, is everyone having this problem? And all the other streamers are like, yeah, we're all kicked off the thing. So I was like, this is cool. This is a great community of people actually sharing ideas. And I saw some other streamers float some ideas past Gina, and she's like, I'll send these up the chain and we'll get these looked at. And I was like, that's really good company behavior to take, like, your hardcore players, the ones that are, hearing a bunch of feedback from their viewers, and actually, they're sending that up the chain so somebody's seeing that. That's doing it right. So big thank you to them for inviting me on board. I'm really, really honored for that. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at twitter.com/Kyle Dempster STU. Stark, you are at twitter.com/
Michael J. Schwartz.
There you go. And what else did I not call out? You can go to the Tenets Podcast .com if you need any additional links for the show. That's also where you can join the guild that we've got going on. So we've had a couple people, which is awesome. We had a couple people from the podcast come by the stream and follow. We've had a couple of them join the guild, which is great. Super welcoming community, amazing people all around. If you need any help in game, they are happy to do it. Just ask in guild chat or on our Discord. Someone will guide you. There's always people looking to do stuff like that. Currently, we got people in there actually looking to make recurring dungeon groups, people that will help you learn how to do 4-player content, as well as they're trying to set up their own trial sort of system as well, to get people into trials and experience that content. So that's really cool. If you're someone out there, it's like, man, I love doing ESO solo, but I want to get some, other gameplay. If you're on PC North America, we got a place for you. I think that's about all the call outs I can do. Twitch, Twitter, that, I don't know, there's something else I'm forgetting, but whatever.
We'll live. We'll be back.
No, yeah, we'll be back. Same time, same place next week. So look forward to us then. Stark, thank you again for your information, and I will talk to you soon. To everyone out there, bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.